do hold them accountable for his disappearance.
Why he left his family without a trace, and the letter his sister kept secret for 20 years.
With one abrupt, swift action, I'm going to completely knock them out of my life.
2020 right there with them as they retrace his final steps to the abandoned bus he called home.
What are your parents going to think when they see you all here together?
The wild truth. And she was a baby abandoned in a phone booth.
I would see women in the street and think, she could be my mother.
He's looking for his long-lost brother. She's looking for the baby she was forced to give away.
What did you promise? I promised I would find her.
Now meet their last best hope to find their families. This woman. Follow along for the door knocks.
Do you happen to know the people that live here?
The DNA swabs and the false starts.
Why is it so hard to find these people?
The reunions, the rejections.
He just basically said, don't you ever call me again.
Click.
And results that are too much to bear.
Sometimes people want those secrets to stay hidden.
Family secrets.
Good evening, I'm Elizabeth Vargas, and thank you so much for joining us tonight on this holiday weekend. We have a very special reunion program in store for you as we set out to solve the ultimate family secret. What happened to a loved one who went missing, a long-lost relative? And we start with my trip to a telephone booth just a few blocks away from our studio here, where a woman was abandoned as a baby, just 2 days old. New York City, 1965. The Beatles play Shea Stadium. A massive blackout turns out the lights. And that summer, on a street corner on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, in a grimy phone booth, somebody abandons a baby. It's a little girl, apparently born just a day or two before. There is no note, and no one saw anything. The only clue dangles from the baby's blanket, a St. Jude medal, the patron saint of desperate causes.
So it's on this corner, 88th and Columbus.
This
is the phone booth.
49 years later, that desperate cause, the abandoned baby, is all grown up. Her name is Louise Jones.
What does it feel like being here?
It feels more strange every time I come.
A successful stockbroker and mother, satisfied with her life. But somehow that phone on that corner keeps calling her back.
So what scenarios have you come up with about what might have happened?
At the end of the day, I think she was really young and really scared, and there was shame involved somehow. And there still is some shame involved, because she hasn't come out to look for me at this point.
And so Louise is now looking for her, and she has questions.
Where have you been?
Why didn't you look for me?
What could it have been that was so awful that made you do that?
Like Louise Jones, John Keller was also abandoned as a baby. The 56-year-old family man works for a motorcycle dealership. He's always been grateful for his adoptive parents, but as a young man, he began wondering where he came from.
So how old were you when you found out that your biological mom abandoned you when you were not quite 2 months old?
I was in my 20s, and I had written a letter to the adoption agency.
The adoption agency revealed a disturbing past. In 1958, his birth parents lived in a basement apartment in the Bronx in New York. When he was just 6 weeks old, John's father left his mother, and then John's mother left him.
My mother had walked across the street and called the police.
In that basement apartment, next to the infant, clean clothes, baby formula, and a note from John's mother. It says, "I found this hard to do, but I am desperate."
Was there a time when you were angry?
I was very angry. I was very angry for a long time.
There was another thunderbolt in that adoption agency letter. John wasn't the only one abandoned. He was shocked to find out that when police found him in that apartment, there was another child there, a little 14-month-old boy. That is how John discovered at the age of 24, he had a brother.
What did you think? You opened this letter and holy cow.
Exactly, it was holy cow. It was like, I couldn't believe what I was reading.
So you never saw your brother again?
I've never seen my brother, ever.
Authorities separated the brothers, who were then adopted by different families. Finding his missing brother becomes an obsession for John. He didn't even know his name until he made a trip to the New York Public Library. John searches old newspaper archives. Suddenly, there, in black and white, the story of 2 infants abandoned, complete with the names of John's mother and father and brother.
Your own life buried deep in the archives of this library.
Till this day, when I read that article, I get the chills.
John imagines that on that traumatic day, his big brother was somehow taking care of him.
To me, he's the hero.
Why?
When Mommy was gone, he was there.
John longs to find his brother, to see his face, to know his name. There are questions he's been waiting 56 years to ask.
And what is it you wonder most?
I just want to know who my brother is.
Then there's Candy Wagner searching from the other side of the divide, a 62-year-old retired physical therapist hoping to find healing. For nearly 20 years, she has been searching for a baby she was forced to give up for adoption in 1967. At age 14, with an absent father and difficult mother, Candy was dating a boy 3 years older.
Your first boyfriend?
My first for everything. There was no question that I was in very deep young love.
When this picture was taken, they didn't know it, but life was about to change drastically for the 2 young sweethearts. Candy was pregnant.
At that time, in a small town where there's no place to hide, it is absolutely traumatic.
When Candy began to show, her mother placed her far away in a Salvation Army home for unwed mothers in New York City.
And she left you there?
Yes, she did.
Alone?
Correct.
Alone and on her own for months, Candy waits for her baby to arrive. But it's a baby she knows she will not be allowed to keep. Her mother was already planning to put the baby up for adoption. When Candy and the other unwed mothers went into labor, an elevator took them through a back entrance into the adjoining hospital so no one would see them. On April 17th, 1967, the baby arrived. It was a girl. Candy asked for her.
May I see her? May I see her?
And they said?
No. No.
What did you do?
I yelled. I screamed.
And then did you get to see or touch her?
I got to see her. I asked to hold her, please let me hold her, and they said no, that would not be a good idea.
Candy secretly named her baby Cindy, but she never saw her again. Back home, she was expected to resume her life as if nothing had happened.
I begged to keep her, and I cried nightly.
When did the crying stop?
Oh, off and on. It's lasted about 47 years.
Were you looking for her in crowds?
All my life. All my life.
You had noticed when you saw her when she was a baby that she had a little red mark on her cheek.
She had a forceps burn.
Not realizing it was temporary, for years afterward, Candy was on the lookout for a little girl with a scar.
So would you find yourself looking at little girls and crowds and
wondering if she had a mark on her cheek?
The ordeal left a mark on Candy, too, although no one could see it. She graduated second in her class, went to college, got married, and adopted a son of her own. But she never forgot about her secret conversations with her unborn child back in that home for unwed mothers.
I could talk out loud to her, and I made promises.
What did you promise?
I promised I would find her.
47 years later, Candy is so determined to keep that promise, she breaks a lifetime of silence to ask for help. She hires an unusual expert, a professional people finder, Pam Slayton, the last resort for those desperate to find the missing branch of their family tree. Can she find Candy's baby? How about John's brother or Louise's mother? As our story continues, our cameras follow 3 very different journeys.
Do you happen to know the people that live here?
And capture 3 heart-wrenching conclusions, decades in the making. Stay with us.
All I do is cry.
3 searchers trying to find the missing pieces of their lives. Louise left in a New York City phone booth as a newborn baby. Candy, a teenaged mother who promised to find the baby she was forced to give up for adoption. And John, abandoned with a brother in a basement apartment when they were just babies. For half his life, John Keller searched in vain for his missing brother. And then one day, several years ago, he happened to see a TV show about searchers just like him.
My name is Pam Slayton. I'm a professional genealogist.
And I had to be home every week when that show hit.
Because you knew that this was somebody who might be able to help you?
This woman was real.
John hired Pam Slayton to look for his brother.
Come on, why don't you come upstairs? I basically live here. This is my office. This is where it all happens. My stacks are kind of broken up by current. Not feeling it. Driving me crazy.
Pam Slayton is a one-woman department of missing persons.
I put in the biological father's name.
She calls herself an investigative genealogist.
I find your case completely intriguing.
Pam knows firsthand that not all searches end well.
You yourself were adopted as a baby.
I am.
And you yourself went on a hunt to find out who you were.
I did.
But Pam says her birth mother did not want to be found. She rejected Pam for a second time. Years later, the memory still hits a nerve.
Wow, it's been 20 years. I don't usually, it changed my identity. It's really the only way I can explain it.
Pam not only survived that trauma, she wrote a book about unlocking family mysteries and discovered her calling, helping other searchers, like Louise Jones, searching for the mother who left her in a Manhattan phone booth in 1965.
How are you?
Good.
Pam Slayton meets Louise to review the little information Louise has gathered over the years.
And do you know what kind of investigation took place?
I think the investigation was pretty simple. They sent my footprints to 4 hospitals in that area. Nothing came back.
Pam has Louise swab her cheek for a DNA test.
All right, now it's going in.
Next, she goes to that Manhattan payphone where Louise was left, putting up posters in the neighborhood, looking for anyone who might remember anything about an abandoned baby 49 years ago, asking for information, enlisting total strangers.
This is what I do for a living. I reunite people that are looking for their birth families.
What is it about Louise's story that is so difficult?
Most adoptees can go back to their agency and get some information. The moment Louise's life begins, essentially, is in that phone booth.
Pam Slayton meets her next client, John Keller, and his girlfriend Karen in the Bronx.
Hi, how are you?
How are you?
Their rendezvous was right outside the basement apartment where John and his brother were abandoned and then separated as babies in 1958.
That's where it all started, and it's emotional.
That missing brother is the focus of John's search.
There's nothing. It's like he doesn't even exist.
Do you think there's separate entrances?
They ring bells and knock on doors, looking for a neighbor who might remember the family.
Do you happen to know the people that live here?
But if there are answers to John's questions, they are no longer to be found in the neighborhood where the mystery began.
All right, so listen, I will be in touch with you, okay? And then we'll talk about what happens next.
John is disappointed, but Pam, back at home at her computer, gets a break.
I found something really interesting that I want to show you.
Searching for John's biological father on Ancestry.com, Pam finds he was from West Virginia.
Just on a hunch, I put in the father's name and I put in West Virginia.
An old city directory from a small town in West Virginia pops up, and there, looking back at her from the dusty digital pages, John Keller's biological parents, both of them.
We have Dewey and Helen. They lived in the rear of a home on Main Street in a little town called Huntington, West Virginia. We finally now have a starting point in this case.
Pam and John fly to West Virginia.
All right, ready?
Let's go.
Let's do this. Good luck.
Hoorah, let's hit it.
They drive around the town his parents once called home. They visit the post office.
Take exit 50.
They stop at the office of Vital Records, hoping to get a look at his brother's birth certificate. But it's not there. They ask for directions to the house where his parents once lived.
Hello. Got a question for you. We are trying to find an old address of 225 Main Street.
I don't know, actually.
But even the mail carrier can't help. Like John's brother, the house seems to have disappeared.
Yep.
The West Virginia road trip yields no direct evidence of his brother's whereabouts.
It's part of the journey, and you have to pick yourself up and start over.
Pam doesn't take every case that comes her way. When Candy Wagner asked her to help find the daughter she'd given up for adoption nearly 50 years before, Pam said no.
It's funny, I didn't want her case initially.
Why not?
Because upstate cases are known to be extremely difficult because New York laws for adoption are so strict.
But Pam's husband, driver, and usually silent partner Mike spoke up.
He's like, hey, you know, she sounds so nice. Just take a look at it. Okay, Mike, go ahead.
Candy had been told that her baby would not have been adopted by anybody living near her small town. But Pam didn't rule that out.
And I came up with a list of everyone up in that region.
Every baby girl born on that day.
Every baby girl in that region born on that day.
When we come back, the hunt for Candy's daughter leads to the unexpected, a confrontation with her past that may be too much to bear. Stay with us. Half a century after two baby brothers were abandoned in a Bronx, New York basement apartment building, after years of fruitless searching, at last, a breakthrough. The moment of truth for John Keller comes when professional people finder Pam Slayton arrives unannounced at his house.
So she surprises you with the news.
And she pulls out paper and she goes, I think this is your brother.
I have to be honest, this looks really good. This looks really, really good.
Pam discovered a mistake in the records. She and John had been searching for years using the wrong birth date for John's brother. It was one day off. Now, Pam tells John a search with the correct date has turned up his brother.
Really?
Really? You okay? You're giving me goosebumps.
Yeah, I'm okay.
I think it's time that we call him and get to the bottom of it.
Okay.
I'm actually trembling.
I just gotta let this be.
My name is Pam Slayton. How are you? I'm calling you because I am trying to find someone who was born on a particular day that might have been adopted.
Sure enough, John's long-lost brother is on the line.
I am legitimately sitting next to your biological brother, who is your full-blooded brother. So I guess the question is, you know, how do you feel about this?
But the phone reunion takes a devastating turn.
I mean, this is someone that has...
Located after 32 years of searching, John's newfound brother wants nothing to do with him.
Really?
It went from, yes, 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 this is me, to you better not have my medical records, you better not, you know, have my social security number.
I have no interest in your personal information, your social security number.
And I had to just take a step back and say, wait a second, that's not what this is about at all.
My client was also adopted. He would be your younger brother.
And what did he say to that?
He just basically said, I don't give a damn, and don't you ever call me again, and hung up the phone.
Okay. All right, thank you. That, unfortunately, did not go well.
Click.
That must hurt.
That's the heartbreak. That's the abandonment again.
Yeah.
And this is the one part of it I don't think I ever prepared for.
If for some reason your brother were watching this segment, what would you want him to hear from you tonight?
I want him to know that I love him unconditionally. I want him to be a part of my life. All he's got to do is pick up the phone, call me. Door's open. And I just pray someday that he does.
Perhaps things will work out better for Candy Wagner, who has searched for one face in the crowd all her life, the daughter she was made to give up for adoption. Pam has stunning news. 47 years after Candy's daughter disappeared from her life, Pam thinks she may have found her.
She spent 17 years looking for her daughter. It took you how long to find her?
I think it was a day.
A day?
Yeah.
Pam compared birth records with likely adoptive families in the county where Candy lived. She found several possible matches, including this woman, Barbara Jo Gowan. By the strangest coincidence, she and Candy were practically neighbors, living in the same community in upstate New York.
So I focused in on Barbara and I thought, wow, her parents are the right age. She's an only child. Let me take a look and see if I can find her on Facebook.
Really? She was the first one that popped out at you?
There were like 4, but she was the one that her information really looked dead on to me.
Barbara was adopted. She was born on the right birth date and at the right hospital. Pam got in touch.
To be quite honest, I thought it was somebody trying to sell me something. Excited.
And now a mother-daughter moment 47 years in the making. The daughter Candy has not seen since the day she was born, the daughter she was never even allowed to touch, is at the door and about to be in her arms.
There it is. Hi, Mom.
Oh my gosh, so beautiful. You're so beautiful. Look at you.
Don't cry. Thank you for finding me. You're giving me something I didn't know I needed. You have always had it. I just hope that you could sense it. I've been out there and you've been in me all my life. In my heart. Every day of my life.
What was the biggest question in your mind at that moment?
Is she gonna like me?
Is she gonna like me?
Yeah. Is she gonna be happy with what she sees? Come on in.
As they get to know each other, mother and daughter compare notes and marvel at living practically next door to each other. Amazingly, they discover they'd even been in the same room 3 months before their reunion when they had both attended this dance recital. Barbara watching her daughter perform, Candy watching her granddaughter. Together, mother and daughter have one more memory to exercise. They drive out to the hospital in Queens, New York, where Barbara was born. The staff warm and welcoming to Candy this time, everything going well until memories come flooding back.
That is a vague recollection.
Do you remember
this
that?
hall is, I do remember this hall.
And then we come across that same ancient elevator, still there.
This was the back entrance.
The one that carried Candy and the other unwed mothers in disgrace through the back door to deliver their babies. The painful ghosts of the past suddenly present. It is too much.
Holy mackerel. Yep, she's going down.
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Candy collapses.
Doc. Okay.
Back on her feet again, shaken, the teenaged unwed mother who wasn't allowed to touch her own baby so long ago, now comforted in her daughter's embrace.
What does a mother look for? What do you want to feel?
Are you okay? And were you cared for and loved? And she was. That was the closure I really needed. That her life was good, her parents were wonderful.
A door to the past swings closed, and another door opens. Which leaves only the perplexing, unsolved case of Louise Jones, abandoned as a baby, left to fend for herself in a New York City phone booth. And 49 years later to the day, she's going back.
It's that far corner where that white car is.
Hi, birthday girl. You marked the occasion of your discovery at the phone booth for a number of years by actually going to the phone booth.
I did, yes.
Why did you do that?
Because I thought if this woman is anything like me, she may show up one of these years on that day, at that time, and we may meet that way. A romantic thought, you know, wouldn't this be nice if she showed up? I mean, that's a fairy tale.
Pam Slayton is there. She does not have any news. She says at this point the best hope for Louise may be you or somebody else watching tonight.
We were hoping that in doing this piece, somebody out there would know something and call in. We just have to hope and pray someone comes forward.
Meanwhile, at the payphone on the corner, it's a party.
We got champagne. We do. We are having a party.
And a toast. The searcher celebrating what she's already found, a lucrative career in finance and a family of her own.
Wow, that's nice.
Are you positive somebody out there knows something that might solve the mystery?
They would have to. I mean, how do you hide something like that? Forever. The truth always comes out at the end of the day, doesn't it? Somehow.
Happy birthday.
As every birthday girl knows, when you blow out the candles, you always get a wish. You can guess what Louise wants.
Happy birthday to you.
Even if the most important things have already come true.
Next, the famous hiker who disappeared into the wild, who lived and died in an abandoned bus. You know the book, the movie, but now his sisters say it's time for the truth you haven't heard.
I'm not ready to go in yet.
But what really spurred him into the wild?
We turn now to another family secret. Millions of you might know the real-life story behind the hit movie and book, Into the Wild, about Chris McCandless, a 24-year-old who went into the Alaskan wilderness and sought shelter in an abandoned bus. But his sisters say you've been kept from the real truth for years. Here's Bob Woodruff taking us back to that bus and back into the wild.
The Alaskan interior is remote and wild, but there are family secrets that lie buried off this lonely stretch of road. Secrets about a story so many people think they know so well.
You just start making your way in. Okay.
Good. Get on.
Very special this time, taking two of my sisters, taking Sean and Shelley with me.
Today, these three sisters are retracing the steps of their famous brother, a young hiker named Chris McCandless.
You ready, you three sisters?
Rock and roll!
Chris's 2-year odyssey across the American West and into the wilderness here was immortalized in a book, required reading in schools across the country, and then an award-winning movie called Into the Wild.
Is there anybody here? Guess not!
It's the tale of a man played by Emil Hirsch, looking remarkably like Chris, bright, educated, compassionate, and full of promise, who gave up creature comforts in search of adventure.
I don't need money. Makes people cautious.
The sisters' journey in their brother's footsteps will be by chopper. It took Chris 4 days to cross this same snowy terrain. After 20 minutes or so, we finally spot it. A bus, Chris's final stop, literally frozen in time, a shrine. It's breathtaking, so very empty.
All you can hear is the river.
Ready? As ready as I'll ever be.
And somehow, so haunted.
Who's this, by the way?
Well, I think this was Chris's Bible.
The abandoned bus sits on a bluff at the end of an old mining trail. Chris's goal was to survive here for 100 days, living off only the land. On day 43, he shot a moose. When he recorded it in his daily journal, he was exuberant.
He always said, you know, nature might be harsh in its honesty, but it never lies to you.
But by day 100, he wrote, "Death looms. Too weak to walk out. Have literally become trapped in the wild." He was in a weakened state, unable to find enough food. He died here of starvation. He has been criticized for being selfish and unprepared. He was there without a map, without proper gear, and without telling a soul. Still, every spring, young hikers make the 2-day trek to the bus.
And something about being here brings out something deep within them.
Chris's voyage has inspired many, a young man who lived by his ideals and gave his life for it.
Live before you die. You know, how many of us actually do that? How many of us actually live? Or do we just exist?
It kind of taps into this longing to wander or to do something unconventional or just live a different life.
But the sisters say there is something that both those who admonish and admire Chris don't know. Tonight, they tell what they say is a vital part of the story, one they think better explains why he was here all alone.
He wanted to really separate himself from a situation that he felt was very toxic.
It was something Corrine didn't want to talk about back in 1997 when 2020 first interviewed her soon after her brother died.
People try to focus a lot on what it was with Chris and why he did what he did, and they look for something that's going to be sensational. But of course, it's nothing I'm going to get into.
But now, in Corrine's recent memoir, The Wild Truth, she says that Chris's journey stemmed from dark family secrets, the traumatic childhood that she says she and Chris shared.
Why did you write this book?
Frankly, I was asked every time I met with a different group of people why Chris left the way he did. I really watered down those answers for a long time. I really felt and learned that I was doing a disservice to him and a disservice to all of those people, because the greatest inspiration comes from truth.
The truth, Corrine says, doesn't begin at the bus, but rather at this house some 3,000 miles away in El Segundo, California. Chris was Corrine's adored older brother.
He was my protector. He was always strong. He succeeded at everything he tried.
The McCandlesses were a portrait of happiness. Dad, Walt, was a renowned rocket scientist who had worked for NASA. Mom, Billy, built the consulting business with him. Corrine fondly remembers family vacations and peaceful times spent outdoors.
Our parents introduced us to nature very early on. We did a lot of tent camping and a lot of hiking.
Chris was confident and charismatic.
People were drawn to Chris.
But family life for him had been much more complicated than it appeared. When Walt started having children with Billy, he was still having children with his first wife, Marcia. Shauna is Walt and Marcia's third child.
Both women were pregnant at the same time. I think a lot of people don't realize that.
In fact, when Chris and Corrine were born, Walt was still married to his first wife, dividing his time between the two homes 30 miles apart.
Your father really had kind of a double life.
He did, but it's funny because even as a little girl, that was just what I knew. This was a man that was in and out of our house. He would spend 4 or 5 days or how many with us, and then he'd be gone for a while. And then he'd come back.
Walt and Marcia finally divorced when Chris was 4, and Chris and Corrine grew up knowing their half-siblings, even going on vacations with them. But they say there was a darker family secret, something Chris's sisters are talking about tonight, that may help explain why Chris took that fateful hike.
My earliest memories are just, you would feel the charge in the air. I mean, it was always there, but it would intensify.
Next, domestic strife brought to life in a movie. Corrine says her dad was often terrifying.
Dad just hauled off and, punched him right on the spine.
And secrets between siblings. What drove Chris McCandless into the wild? Corrine reveals letters from her brother that she's kept hidden for over 20 years.
I'll be through with them once and for all, forever.
It was the adventure of a lifetime. Chris McCandless, the famed hiker whose journey into the wilderness was made famous in this movie. But what drove him into the wild? His sister Corrine and his half-sisters, Shelley and Shauna, say the whole story has never been truly told. They say their father, Walt, was controlling and domineering, with a hair-trigger temper that expressed itself sometimes in angry verbal outbursts, and often in physical attacks on his first wife, Marcia, and his second wife, Billy. Shelley lived with Chris and Corrine her senior year in high school.
I remember a lot of throwing and shoving.
We would hear raised voices, and it would get louder and louder. Chris would usually come and grab me and get me outside of the house. If we couldn't get out in time, we were always called in to witness the violence.
Called in by your father?
By both. We would hear my mom say, kids, come look what your father is doing to me. And then he would scream her after her, kids, get in here now. Look what your mother is making me do.
Look what your father's doing to me. Look at this, look at that.
Dad would throw Mom down on the bed and he'd be choking her and she would be screaming out for help.
Corrine's half-sisters say they too were witness to Walt's volcanic temper in their home with their mom, Marcia. In 1972, shortly before their divorce, Marcia obtained this restraining order against Walt, alleging that he had struck her in the arm and face, that he threatened her on numerous occasions, and that she feared for her safety. In her book, Corinne also described an incident in which Walt's aggression was directed at Chris.
What did you say?
Dad just hauled off and, punched him right on the spine. And Chris just turned and looked at him and just sort of like a puff of disgust across his lips. And I saw this fear come across my father's face. And then Chris just turned around and walked away.
Walt and Billy declined to appear in this 2020 report. In a statement to ABC, they said this about Corinne's book: "This fictionalized writing has absolutely nothing to do with our beloved son, Chris, his journey, or his character. This whole unfortunate event in Chris's life 22 years ago is about Chris and his dreams." Before he left, Chris wrote Corinne letters she has kept secret for over 2 decades. But tonight, she's sharing them.
I'm not releasing his letters to hurt my parents. I'm releasing parts of his letters for people to get a better understanding of Chris.
In a PBS documentary, Corinne reads a portion of them.
Once the time is right, with one abrupt, swift action, I'm going to completely knock them out of my life. I'm going to divorce them as my parents. I'll be through with them once and for all, forever.
And forever it would be. Although his parents tried to locate him, even hiring an investigator, he made himself impossible to find, using the name Alexander Supertramp. And 4 months into his journey, Chris's body was found in his magic bus. He had starved to death, weighing just 67 pounds. He had written this final note.
When I learned of Chris's death, it was like telling me that there's not going to be oxygen in the air tomorrow. I mean, it's just not possible.
Healing has been a long journey. The sisters say all of the McCandless children are estranged from their father. The McCandless sisters have found solace by retracing their brother's steps. For them, Chris's magic bus is sacred ground. Shauna and Shelley have never been here.
All right, are you ready, sisters?
Each sister taking her time, hesitant to walk toward the bus.
It's so peaceful, like its own little cul-de-sac. All right. I'm gonna just walk around. I'm not ready to go in yet. I just need a moment. You know what? It's not just Chris, it's just a lot of things.
Although rust has spread and the windows are now cracked and broken, the bus is much like it was when Chris was here. But now there are messages from pilgrims left on its walls.
There's some new entries since I was here last.
The McCandless sisters are eager to add their names to the hundreds of people who have come to this bus before them.
My brother, I love you.
Yeah, well, no. Infinitely. I love you infinitely and unconditionally. There's journals in here.
In this small bus and in the vast Alaskan wilderness, the McCandless sisters take in every moment.
You've got a lot of heart here.
I come to visit the space where he lived and died.
But even this powerful moment doesn't feel quite complete.
What are your parents going to think when they see you all here together in front of this bus?
I think they'll feel sad, Bob. I think they'll feel sad.
You know, Walt and Billy deserve sympathy for losing their son, absolutely. You know, I don't blame Walt and Billy for his death, but I do hold them accountable for his disappearance. The fact that we didn't know where he was, and the reason he felt that he needed to become Alexander Supertramp and not Chris McCandless.
Chris was planning a life full of adventure. His sisters are certain it was never his intention to die here.
You know, you asked me yesterday, Bob, if I thought that Chris was a casualty of domestic violence. And that's just, that I'd never really thought about it that way. But I do think that he was.
Well, he didn't survive it. We all survived it.
Before leaving, the sisters do what so many pilgrims have done before them. They pose for a photo, of course, leaving a spot open for their beloved brother.